Off by saying Passion of the Christ. I tried watching The Passion of the Christ and I despised it.
Yep.
I hate it. I was getting angry watching it, and so I switched it off.
Yeah.
And so I decided to watch the complete opposite of it, a cult 80s classic, unfairly judged upon release. And that is Return to Oz.
Return to Oz?
Yes.
Oh, I've never seen The Wizard of Oz, never mind Return of Oz.
You're a bit of an odd person then. Return to Oz is a bit infamous.
Yep.
In the lexicon of children's films.
Yeah.
Return to Wizard, even if you've not seen it, you know Wizard.
I know what it's about, yeah.
Yeah.
Michael Jackson, Diana Ross, and other 80s stars.
Yeah.
Do you know what's actually weird about, you know that version of Oz?
The Wiz.
The Wiz. Do you know who directs that?
Who is it?
Sidney Lumet.
Alright, yeah.
The director of like Dog Day Afternoon.
Weird.
It is weird.
So Return to Oz. Well, the original film, Wizard of Oz, everyone knows it. Bright, happy, la 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 musical film with Judy Garland, and it's very camp, and it's a classic. It's one of the most beloved American films of all time. It's a good film.
Even I've not seen it and know it's good.
Yeah. Disney somehow acquired the rights in the 80s and decided to make a sequel. It was almost like nearly 40 years down the line to the film, and decided to make it into a dark apocalyptic vision of Oz.
Okay.
It's fairly awesome, to be fair.
Yeah.
So you're gonna love this.
Yeah.
So the film picks up a few months after Dorothy's come back from Oz. Than the events of the original film. Also interestingly, the original film, Judy Garland is an adult playing a child. In this, it's a child.
Yeah.
It's definitely a little girl. And Dorothy is depressed. She hates her life in this shitty farm in Kansas, and she just wants to return to Oz. And her aunt and uncle think she's going insane, and she's depressed. We don't know what to do with her.
Yeah.
It's the late 1890s, and obviously we don't know what depression is. So they decide to take her for electroshock treatment.
Okay.
To zap her out of this depression.
Yeah.
So they take Dorothy to this like psychological therapy place to get electroshock treatment done on her. And through a series of events, she escapes and she ends up back in the magical world of Oz. Only it's not exactly magical anymore. It's actually a ruin of its former self.
Yeah.
After Dorothy left, all of Oz has basically been destroyed, and it's a rumble. It's just a rumble of shit. It's been taken over by this crazy witch who can swap heads in a really terrifying sequence.
Okay.
And it's controlled by her minions called the Wheelers, who are like these kind of scary punks who go around just destroying stuff.
Yeah.
And she soon discovers that this evil chap called the Gnome King has taken over, who's basically like the devil. He's like a rock version of the devil. And Dorothy has got to work out what happened, get a new band of friends together, and stop the king from doing his evil shit.
Okay.
The film is terrifying. Like it's no hard to be a god.
No.
In terms of terrifying.
Or some of the other horror films we'll be talking about soon.
But for a children's film, it's really terrifying. And I think you could read the film as being all about childhood trauma.
Yep.
And how it can affect your mental psyche. Because the world of Oz is quite clearly, it is modelled on Dorothy's imagination.
Yep.
That's kind of what Oz is. So it makes sense that when she comes back in this depressed and traumatised state from getting electroshock treatment, the whole place is destroyed and in ruin. And the film is all about her coming to terms with her depression and trauma, basically.
Yep.
And then everything's restored at the end. So along the way, Dorothy meets new characters. One's called Tick Tock, who is a depressed soldier. He's like a clockwork soldier guy.
Yeah.
A very weirdly Freudian pumpkin guy. He's like this walking Jack. He's called Jack. He's like this walking pumpkin guy.
Yeah.
Who insists on calling Dorothy Mum.
Okay.
Which is a bit weird. A talking chicken, which is really weird. And then probably the weirdest character in the film is Dorothy and co get kidnapped by this evil witch who can swap heads. She keeps all her heads like in these like glass cabinets, and she like picks them out and swaps her heads over and stuff. It's really weird, terrifying. Dorothy finds this magic powder to bring stuff to life, and she brings to life the like them like heads of animals that are hung up on walls.
Oh yeah,
I
yeah.
don't know what you call them, but she brings
Trophy heads.
Yeah, trophy heads. Yeah, she brings like a moose to life.
Oh yeah.
Which is like this talking moose head, like this fully animatronic like talking moose head.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's really weird. It's a really weird film. And so yeah, so the whole thrust of it is basically that Dorothy is trying to get down what happened to Oz, and it does a really fun little twist.
Yeah.
So the original Wizard of Oz is obviously it's a fairy tale childhood classic, but in return to Oz, like she starts to discover the truths behind the world of Oz, and as you get older, you discover the truth about reality. So like in a really weird turn, all the Munchkins have gone.
All right.
Like I think they're all dead.
like the Munchkin who hanged himself on the set.
yeah. But there's no Munchkins in the world anymore.
Okay.
This evil witch has gone round and she's basically chopped the heads off attractive women so she can use them as heads for her body, which is really weird.
That's weird. Yeah.
All the residents of the Emerald Kingdom have been turned into stone and they're just like stood still. It's in a really cool sequence. It's like she's walking through the rumbles of the Emerald City and like there's no emeralds anymore either, and all the people are just there like. Oh, like yeah, she finds all these ones with like the heads chopped off, and the witch has used these for like her own heads, basically.
Okay.
So she discovers that actually Oz is a bit of a nasty place. The Gnome King is pissed off because all the emeralds that are in the Emerald City were actually the Gnome King's, and they actually stole them from him.
Yeah.
And so he's pissed off. So he basically just wanted to reclaim what was his.
Okay.
Which is a nice little twist.
Yeah.
There's some amazing practical effects in the film. It's all practical effects, I think. There's lots of claymation. I'm a massive fan of claymation in films.
I love claymation. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's a really great scene when she first encounters the Gnome King. He's part of a rock, and like it's this constantly shifting rock thing, and like the rock's talking to her and stuff. It's shifting around. It's really cool. Then he becomes a real person, and the effect is lost a little bit, but it's still fairly wicked. And there's the TikTok himself is kind of like this fully animatronic kind of robot thing guy, and just amazing practical effects. I think all done by Jim Henson of Muppets fame.
Yep.
He had a contract with Disney at the time, so he did lots of practical effects for. I think it was Brian Henson. Yeah, it was Brian Henson, Jim Henson's son.
Yeah.
And I think they had a contract with Disney at the time, so they did a lot of practical effects for their films. But as you can probably tell from my description, this is a thoroughly un-Disney film.
Yeah.
If anything, it's really traumatising.
Okay.
Do you think it's the kind of film that you'd want to show to your little sister?
No, not at all.
But maybe to older children.
Yeah.
It'd be good. Maybe you get into maybe like 6, 7, 8.
Okay.
I think there's a lot of trying to keep a child as safe as possible. I kind of don't really agree.
No.
And there's a lot of big thing about whether films are too scary for children. Is Harry Potter too scary for children?
Harry Potter.
Yeah, people were like, because Harry Potter does get quite dark and quite violent.
Fucking hell.
They were like, is Harry Potter too dark and too violent for children? And I'm like, no. If anything, it makes them invest more into the story. So Return to Oz is a really good example of that. Dorothy goes through some traumatising dark shit throughout the film. She goes through this dark, disturbing journey where in reality she gets electroshock treatment, and in Oz all the world has been destroyed and everything's just gone to shit basically. And she encounters all these really scary moments. There's the witch that can swap heads that all talk and all stare at her when she walks by. There's a scene where at the end where the Gnome King reveals his true self and he basically becomes like this giant mountain of death with like all the flames in the background. Basically Dorothy and Co went to hell.
Okay.
There's a really great scene towards the end where the Gnome King's like, okay, look, I'll restore everything, but I turn people into ornaments, and I've turned the Scarecrow, who's the King of the Emerald City, into an ornament. If you can guess which ornament he is, I'll restore the world and set everything free again. And all of the friends going, almost like lambs to the slaughter, guessing what the ornament is, and then if they fail, they get turned into one. So it's almost like it was systematically, he's almost like killing each of Dorothy's friends. But those kind of moments and those kind of scenes, I think make children invest more into the story because they're scared, but they're following Dorothy along because we want to see Dorothy get out of the bad shit she's going through, and then in the end, she does get out of the bad shit she does. And if anything, it makes you invest in the story more, and you want to see the character win. You want to see the character get out of it.
Kids like to be scared anyway.
Well, I mean, it's quite telling what I'm doing is because you only need to contrast it to Oz the Great and Powerful, which is
the Sam Raimi
the Sam Raimi family prequel thing to The Wizard of Oz, to get an idea of the differences between Return to Oz and Oz the Great and Powerful. On the one hand, you've got this dark, complex children's film which takes the subject matter seriously, but not too seriously.
Yeah.
It's dark and it's traumatising, but at the same time there's light at the end of the tunnel. All the sappy, saccharine, not taking any risks of Oz the Great and Powerful. And just to contrast the difference between children's films then and children's films
now,
which is we'll give them minions. We'll have them laugh at the funny creatures. We won't have them, be challenged in any way possible.
I mean, those are the worst ones. Have you heard of Veggie Tales?
No.
They're a group of vegetables who go on adventure, and they also spout Christian messages.
Oh no!
You should. They're fairly funny. You can.
Why are you a doubting character? Oh no. But yeah, so for whatever reason, we want to make children's films as clean as possible and not challenge them. Yeah. That said, Return to Oz did fail, it did flop.
Yeah.
And it got an incredibly mixed critical reception. But basically people were saying it's just too dark, it's too traumatising, it's too different from the original. And yeah, it is not suitable for kids. I disagree on most counts.
Yeah.
If anything, it's probably maybe even a better film than the original.
Okay.
The original film is beloved, and I love watching the original film, but is it a good film? I don't know. Judy Garland isn't great as Dorothy.
No.
It's a little bit weird that this adult who's probably drinking and taking drugs is playing like a 12-year-old girl. It's a little bit weird. I like how in Return to Oz it actually is a little girl playing Dorothy. Yeah. Like the whole story suddenly makes more sense.
Yeah.
But like everyone's depressed in the film.
Yes.
Like everybody, like Dorothy's uncle's faking an injury so he can get out of like working on the house. Like he just sat there, he's just not doing anything. And there's like the jack-o'-lantern, the pumpkin guy, and he's like looking for his mom and he can't work out what's going on. And TikTok's depressed because his whole like nature is based around his gears. He's like, Dorothy would see Dorothy's like, oh, TikTok, if only your gears wound by themselves. Like, unfortunately, that's the way I was designed. And it's like, oh.
Sounds like Majora's Mask.
It is a little bit, yeah. It's the Majora's Mask of the Wizard of Oz films.
Yeah. Is this the only film Frank Oz directed?
I don't think Frank Oz directed it.
Oh, right, I thought he did.
No.
Who is it then who directs it?
It's some guy. Some guy. No, I think it was just the Henson Company had like... Frank Oz has directed a couple films.
Oh, it's not Frank Oz, it's someone else, but I can't think who it is.
I know which ones you're thinking. It's stuff like Labyrinth and the Dark Crystal.
Are they Frank Oz films?
I think they are, but I can't confirm that.
I know who this is. This is Walter Murch.
That's it, yeah, Walter Murch.
Yeah, he was the editor for The Conversation and Godfather, yeah, I know who it is.
Walter Murch, yeah, that's it. But I think the 80s were actually a golden age for dark, more challenging children's films.
Like the Never-Ending Story.
Yeah, Never-Ending Story. You had Labyrinth, you had The Dark Crystal, Return to Oz, and a few others. But these were dark fantasy films that didn't treat children like they were idiots. They actually made them think about the films.
Yeah.
That said, my only criticism, on a side note, my only criticism of Labyrinth is the same criticism I've got of the original Wizard of Oz, where I think for the character, the casted are a bit too old. Jennifer, what's she called?
Connelly.
Yeah, Jennifer Connelly. Have you seen Labyrinth?
No.
It's a really good film. I really like Labyrinth, but I think Jennifer Connelly's a little bit too old. She's like a 16, 17-year-old girl that still plays and dresses up as princess.
Ugh.
It's a bit... Yeah, it doesn't really work, but other than that, it's a really great film. But I guess it makes it less creepy when David Bowie starts to, come onto a kind of thing.
Yeah.
But if you should check out Labyrinth and The Dark Crystal. They're both really, really good films.
And probably get round to watching The Wizard of Oz.
Wizard of Oz. You should probably watch. You should probably watch The Wizard of Oz.
Yeah.
But I would probably recommend Return to Oz more.
Okay.
Because I think it's a better film.
Yeah.
Just because it, as you probably tell, it deals with darker themes and it doesn't treat children like they're idiots. It makes them go through a kind of dark, traumatizing experience and they come out of it having learned something on how to deal with depression.
Yeah.
mercifully, I was getting a little bit worried towards the end because at the end of the film, there's a big twist about there's this princess of Oz, and she's called Ozma, who's apparently a character in the original books.
Yeah.
And she's basically Dorothy's surrogate in Oz, and she rules Oz. And she's like, "Oh, you can come back at any time you want, Dorothy. You can come back to Oz whenever you want." I was a bit like, "Oh, come on, don't undermine it all now. Don't have her return to Oz whenever she wants." There's a really great scene at the end where like Dorothy's in a bedroom and she's a bit happy and she's looking at the mirror and she sees Ozma like a reflection of herself and she's like, "Oh, I'm coming," kind of thing. But then her aunt calls her down and she's like, "Oh no, I've got to put you away," kind of thing. So it's the implication that it is all in their heads, and if she ever does want to return to that fantasy world, it's always going to be very in her head. But ultimately, she's moved on and she's grown up and she's moving away from Oz, basically.
Oh, good. What is it out of 10, by the way?
Oh, it's a really hard one to rate. I don't, because there are certain parts which kind of don't really work. Some of it falls a little bit flat. There's some scenes where Dorothy's like imprisoned in the witch's house, which kind of fall a little bit flat. I also wish there was just a little bit more time for Dorothy to bond more with her new friends.
Yeah.
Because then it makes scenes where they all go basically like lambs to the slaughter again, probably more emotional. But
yep.
Just because you've not had a lot of time for them to get to know each other. It's an 8 out of 10.
Okay.
Yeah, 8 out of 10.
Very good.
It's one of the I think it's one of the best children's films of the 80s. I think it's better than the original movie. I prefer it.
Yeah.
I'm taking the contrarian opinion, but I think kids will get a lot more out of it, and they'll remember it.
Yeah.
It's whether it's traumatizing or not, it's an experience of the film that I don't, because of the images and how strong they are, I don't think it's one that'll leave them anytime soon.
No.
And they'll probably look back at on adults being like, "Oh wow, yeah, Return to," and it's the kind of film where, you always have a film when you're a kid and you watch it and you like it, but you don't really fully appreciate it until you get a bit older.
Oh yeah, there's loads of those.
Yeah, I think Return to Oz is a bit like that.
Yeah.
Where like, you'll watch it and you won't get why it's so dark. But then you watch it back and you're like, "Oh right." Maybe it's like Where the Wild Things Are. Maybe some poor child watched Where the Wild Things Are as a kid and didn't really get why all the monsters were sad.
Yeah.
They'll go back and watch it and be, "Oh right, yeah, it's because the representations of the little boy's feelings and emotions," and
yeah.
Appreciate that James Gandolfini is a monster. But that's a great children's film.
That's an amazing. I love that. I went to see that at the cinema when it came out.
Yeah,
It's a great film.
It's really great.
Sad as hell though.
Well, that's one of the things why I like it, because again, Return to Oz and Where the Wild Things Are, I think, could be in the same breath, because they deal with emotions other than just happiness.
Yeah.
I think too many children's films deal with, they'll have a sad scene, but only one sad scene. Yeah, no, I'm trying to think of like in Frozen, when you think Anna's dead and she's frozen herself as a statue, That's a sad scene, but that's basically the only sad scene in the film. The rest of it's kind of a light-hearted romp. But I like how Return to Oz and Where the Wild Things Are deal with other emotions.
Well, you've got the great one, usually held up as being the greatest kids film of all time. Do you know what I'm going to say? E.T.
Oh, E.T., yeah.
E.T. is a very melancholy film.
Yeah.
It's about two best friends, one of whom is going to leave or die.
Yeah.
And that kind of stuff's missing. Where's the melancholy?
Yeah,
where's the sadness?
I think there needs to be more of it, because we were saying about in our feminist rant how media can affect the way people perceive the world. If you introduce children to a broad range of emotions and how you deal with them, they're better suited to dealing with them in later life.
Yeah.
So if you watch Return to Oz and you have a vague understanding of what depression can mean, then you know how to deal with it.
If only Kurt Cobain had watched Return to Oz.
I know, yeah, he may have come out of it like, "Oh, no, maybe not. Maybe not. I want to become fat, old and balding and do an acoustic tour where I perform songs like Teen Spirit on repeat."
I'm going to do a blues album with B.B. King.
Yeah, exactly. Something like that anyway. And also Where the Wild Things Are, where the mood of it is very sad.
Yeah.
And very depressing. But that's kind of the point, because, kids' emotions are up and down all the time. One minute they're happy, and then the next minute, they're sad. That's one of the most amazing things about being... I'm a scout leader in my spare time, and, 1 minute a kid will be super happy and, yeah, we'll do this activity. And then one thing will happen, and they'll just be they'll just start crying. And then, "Oh, you're right," kind of thing. And then, 5 minutes later, "Oh, yep, back to playing the game." It's like, it's so weird.
Yeah.
But that's what kids like, and that's what I like about films like Return to Oz and Work of Wild Things like, because it does chart the emotional range, the huge emotional spikes children go through and how they feel.
Yeah.
So, highly recommended, yeah. I think there's a real art to making, like most things, but there's a real art to making good children's films, and I think a basic fundamental of it is understanding children and what they feel like and what they go through, and making films that really speak to them on some kind of level.
Yep.
So I highly recommend Return to Oz. It's on Netflix now.
Oh, cool.
It's just been added.
Yeah.
So hopefully it'll reach a whole new generation of children, because it kind of flopped on its initial release. It gained a bit of a cult following in the 90s, and then as children I grew up in the 80s are now growing up and in positions to write articles about them.
Yeah.
They can comment on it. There's a really great article by Nathan Rabin on it, actually.
Is there?
It's part of My World of Flops.
Oh yeah.
And he calls it a secret success.
Oh great.
But now I think it's at the point now where it's not even a secret success. It is just regarded as just been a great movie.
Yeah.
Which is really good. As I said, especially compared to Oz the Great and Powerful. It's a really good indicator of the kind of children's films that should be made. So yeah, check the film out. It's great.
Cool.